Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Best Practices in Audit Implementations, Audit Software Implementations. My name is Jim Kaplan, and with me are Rich Lanza, AuditSoftware.net, and Don Sparks from Automation. And this webinar represents a collaboration between Auditnet and AuditSoftware.net with participation by Automation in delivering training series focusing on audit software. We're really glad that you could join us. I'll be moderating today's webinar. A little bit about myself for those of you who don't know me. You can read that on the slide. I'm not going to go into any detail. I believe the next slide is Rich. If you would give them a brief introduction to yourself, Rich. There's a little bit about Auditnet there.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, a little bit about Auditnet here. Did you want to go over the housekeeping? I'll go over myself, and then we can go back to the housekeeping.
Yeah, you can do yours, and then Don can do his, and then I'll cover the housekeeping, and then we'll get right into today's webinar.
Perfect. Yeah, no, thanks everyone. I've been working with audit software for close to 20 years, built a little work paper package probably about 17 years ago at a company internally, and have been doing data analytics for over 20 years, and even wrote a book which many of you or everyone here today that's attending will get a copy of, The Buyer's Guide to Audit Software, which is about 5 years old. It's not even on my list of recently contributing author because it's over 5 years old. But at the same time, I think you'll appreciate it because the market has not changed that much. I went back to it, and a lot of the best practices from it are very relevant. So hopefully all of those experiences will come across today. And Don, do you mind saying a little bit about yourself as well?
Sure. You can read the screen there. I've been just about everywhere, but my start with data analytics goes back to 1977, before PCs, before IDEA, before ACL. If you were a well-resourced audit shop, you used Dial 280 back then, and I started with Dial 280 at CNA Insurance. A lot has changed, but a lot of learning has not. I did not take a training class. I sat with somebody that knew Dial for 3 days, and by the 4th day I was off and running on my own, creating my own scripts, running them against mainframe data, and I was part of a 65-person internal audit shop, and the other 64 auditors had 2 weeks of training 6 or 7 months before I started while I was still in college, and not one of them ever learned how to use Dial. I became the Dial guru, as they called it at the time, and I was doing all the analytics for just about everybody. So you speed forward today, in our time zone, we see a lot of that still happening. So no easy answer as to why it is that way, but obviously I chose to stick with analytics throughout my career and continue today. So that's a little bit about me. Feel free to reach out with questions as we're going through, and we'll have a good time.
Thanks, Don. And Rich, I'll just go over the webinar housekeeping right now. Very briefly, the webinar and its material are property of Auditnet and Cash Recovery Partners. Unauthorized usage or recording of this webinar or any of its material is strictly forbidden. We will be recording the webinar, and if you paid the registration fee, which today we've waived the registration fee, most of you have not paid. If you have paid, then please contact me, and we'll see that you get access to another future webinar. You will be provided access to the recording within 2 to 5 business days after the webinar is over. Downloading or otherwise duplicating the webinar recording is expressly prohibited. We do have an evaluation questionnaire that we'd like you to fill out after the webinar is over. That'll help us to improve this and make changes for future webinars. In addition, because this webinar qualifies for CPE, you must answer the polling questions in accordance with NASBA criteria and rules, and we can only award CPE to those who attend the event, and answer all the polling questions. You have to answer all of the polling questions. You can submit questions during the webinar. Just submit them via the chat box on your screen and press return, and I will be monitoring those questions, and we'll either answer them during the webinar or at the conclusion, and if we can't get to all your questions, we will try to answer them by email. But you've got myself as well as Rich Lanza and Don Sparks here to act as subject matter experts and help you. If GoToWebinar does stop working, you may need to close and restart. You can always dial in and listen and follow along with the handout that you should have received if you registered before 9 or 10 a.m. this morning. Let me turn it back to you, Rich, to go over the agenda for today, and then we'll get right into it.
Great. And bear with me one second. Okay, so here were the learning objectives, and we tried to set it up a bit where we're talking about some of the industry trends. I thought maybe I should have done the definitions first, but I find it's a little more interesting to start off with the trends. So we'll talk about some of the trends that might affect your next purchase, and and I welcome feedback from everyone on this one on the trends. I find the same trends back in 2008 have not really grown that different or changed that much. So you'll see that. We'll then define all of these different products, and what I found interesting is Jim has a similar slide on all the different products and how they're very similar in how they work, and how data analytics actually is the center of that slide that I'm talking about. I'm giving away Jim's slides here. But when you see it, you'll see data analytics is in the middle, and the reason for that, I believe, is when I look at it, is because data analytics is used across all of those areas, and that'll be one of the learning objectives as well. Then we're going to talk a bit about business planning and best practices and kind of what hinders a implementation and what you can do to get over those obstacles in the way, and along the way kind of talking about some of the best practices and business plan ideas you should be thinking about as you're setting up your plan. And I think when I put business plan, I really think I'm saying audit plan, as well as kind of creating a cost benefit for what we're doing here. So anyway, those were the learning objectives that I had down, and for those the slides I believe have been sent to you, so you should have them, and we'll be able to, you'll see how these sections kind of come out. As we go into the survey, recently I wanted to kind of start off with this slide. It's a little hard to read, but you can get it from Auditnet right on the home page. I made a little picture of I believe the page or the report at the top left there. But if you can read it, there's a variety of audit softwares on the bottom, audit management, continuous controls monitoring, et cetera, and there's a light blue, like powder blue color, and that's the color of fully deployed. The kind of brownish yellow, I guess, mustard would be partially deployed. And notice there, I don't want to say forget the rest, but kind of forget the rest for a second. Just looking at those two bars across all of the software, you're probably looking at maybe a 30, at most a 40 to 50% adoption rate, and even there, it's kind of questionable because what is fully deployed and partially deployed, but again, very low rates of implementation across, and I think that goes into the trends, it goes into the obstacles, how to get over the obstacles that we'll be talking about, but it is, I don't want to say it's a sad state, but it's not a great state. It's not everyone is fully deployed and now we're enhancing the tool sets. We're kind of at a point where we haven't even picked one. In the buyer's guide, we initially wrote one back in 2006, and it was updated in 7 and 8, and I'm sending you the most updated one. It didn't change that much over the years, but what we did was we listed out all of the vendors that we could find at the time, and that would answer a small survey that we had of them. And we basically did about 800 or so hours of research. We really went through all the different industry trends and best practices that all the vendors were talking about. That was one of the key questions we were asking every vendor is, what makes this stuff work? What ends up getting this implemented? and trying to bring that back into the guide itself. And you will be getting the most updated copy of that, and we'll be, a lot of the slides kind of relate to that as we go through today. And what makes it unique a bit is, and this is where the market, I think, is unique, and not so much the book is unique, but that the market's unique, is that as auditors we need to have a product that has this auditor perspective, which very few people have. I mean, even in the business community, I mean, it's sort of, the audit group is sort of separate from the rest of finance and accounting and everyone else, and has a different perspective, things they're tracking. And you'll see that in the products where, a product like an IDEA or ACL that has truly auditor-specific testing is something that had to be built in based on, desires by auditors over time, but may not make sense to the rest of the world. Things like digital analysis and sampling would not make sense. And it is a very niche market with I don't want to say very small vendors, but relatively smaller vendors. I mean, generally speaking, these products aren't making hundreds of millions of dollars every year, or even billions of dollars as part of a very, very large software company. It's usually relatively smaller companies that are based on people that were auditors in the past, or had developed some software and decided to kind of make a company out of it. This is sort of how it grew. It's very organic and small, and I think that because of that, it definitely has a different perspective when you're selecting a vendor. You're generally not selecting IBM when you're making your audit software decision. It is, usually, again, an IDEA, an ACL, a Thomson Reuters type of a product kind of thing. So I did want to note that as well. And, with all of that, I'm kind of leading up to the landscape and trends. And before I did that, I didn't know if there was any comments that anyone had. I'm looking at some of the questions and just taking a look there as well. But any thoughts from the group? Otherwise, I can, I'll just keep jumping into the landscape here.
Well, Jim Kaplan here. Yeah, Rich, I think that you've hit the nail on the head. And basically, from the survey that we did get over 1,500 auditors that replied to that survey, and that chart that Rich demonstrated to you really, opened our eyes as to the way that auditors are using audit software, not just data analytics, but other software as well. And basically, that was one of the reasons why we did this webinar, and it's basically to provide you with a compilation of best practices in audit software, and it really forms the foundation of the strategies and ideas to make a paradigm shift to increase the integration and use of technology by auditors. So I think that, I think you're going to get a lot of information out of this. And I know we have a question that came in from Cecilia. In terms of web-based applications, and the data is not accessible in tables, like accounting. I don't know if you want to hold off on answering that now.
Yeah, I don't mind answering it now. It's fine. It is it's probably different from what we would get in the slides themselves.
Yeah. And I think Don can probably provide some perspective on this as well. So
please. Yeah, I mean, I don't have as much experience there. I know I work with a travel and entertainment type company where they're an audit software just for travel and entertainment expenses, and what they're doing is kind of getting the web data. And really one of their large benefits of working with them is that they've mapped out all of those web tables, and I guess you're saying they're not tables, it's stored in different formats, but they're kind of making that. So I'd say the trend is more towards someone who can easily grab that data and put it into an Excel spreadsheet. Would be kind of a trend towards an application like that. But I also know the products are starting to support things more like XML type files, etc. Although I'm going to jump to Don and say if he has anything, because I've never imported an XML file, so I will admit that.
Well, the XML files have the data elements also contain the data name, so when I was at the IIA, I did a lot of surveys. In fact, I created the flash survey product that the IIA uses, and of course the nice thing about that is the questions to the survey came in via email, and of course the questions had the question number, and you could easily import that into an Access database because it understood the XML-like format. So it was very easy to just grab your emails and append them to an Access database through XML. So don't run into a lot of XML applications out there, but I think it continues to exist, and it was very handy for doing things like that. So
yeah, and like I could liken it to like a Monarch coming out, or the idea putting their PDF report writer importer into the tool. It's sort of like once the market starts to expand more in that area, PDF files being one of the things that a lot of auditors have to import. There was a time where I guess we couldn't do anything with them, and then someone came up with a tool just to be able to strip that data out. And I would expect a lot of the products to support that. That should be, they have in the past, which is a good sign.
mm-hmm.
All right. Well, anyway, without further ado, let me jump into the landscape and trends, and feel free, everybody, to jump in. I think we've answered all the questions so far. So, who's using audit software? I wanted, when I was, a lot of these slides, mind you, come out of the book, so I wanted to note that you will see a lot of this kind of showing up as sections within the book. But who uses audit software? I tried to think about all the different groups and probably list them in order of usage. Internal auditors, I found, still were the #1 users of audit software, be it the data analytic or work paper or risk management. External auditors, it depends. I mean, they had some IT audit applications and other financial audit, like financial statement audit tools and that kind of thing. But it was less limited. Fraud examiners can do a lot, but don't tend to generally. And then from there on out, it was pretty limited. What you would see a process manager, booting up, if you will, kind of an audit report, or being involved with the work application, like the work management application. They may sign into it just to kind of like put in their few little things that they do that impact controls, but that would be kind of their usage of the tool, if you will. I think for the most part, a lot of the usage of that tool is still even done more so by the internal auditor. And what I found interesting, I mean, these are going back, and I doubt I wonder how many new products have advanced. But when we went back and tabulated all of the vendors and said, when did these guys start their business? We were very curious. Again, it's quite old, but what we were able to kind of figure out is many of them, kind of kicked up in the Sarbanes-Oxley era, and a lot of them were these risk management type tools and workflow and work management type tools. So that's something where it was interesting. I would bet that there's a leveling off from 2007 to 2013, because that would be my guess. I'm not sure how many new products are coming out every day in this area. I do see, though, a lot of combinations. So it's where products would, they would say that they're a new product, but they're, now instead of Paisley, they're now Thomson Reuters Auto Audit or something like that. So it was more of a transference, and you saw that where the trend is going is more of this consolidation. So, with that said,
well, you also have CCH with Teammate.
Yeah.
You're seeing software companies being acquired by other similar type businesses. IBM has bought SPSS.
Caseware with Idea, I mean, even though there's a long-term relationship there, yeah, Exact Monitor, ACL with workpapers.com, and something
right.
With Monarch.
So there's a lot of consolidating that you're seeing, which would impact your slide there.
Yeah,
interesting Idea, and ACL did start back in '87, '88. So they're 25 years out there.
Yeah.
When did Excel actually market?
That's a good question.
You mean Lotus? You mean
And
Lotus 123?
Yeah,
Or
was before them.
VisiCalc?
Well, we used TCalc on the mainframe in 1978. That's where I learned spreadsheets, was on an IBM 360 with TCalc. That's before there were really PCs out there. So,
Right.
so the spreadsheet concept, became common with VisiCalc, of course, coming out with for the Apple machine. But there has, things have come and gone.
Yeah, and looking at your timeline there, and what's
Right.
been added. You look at things like ACL and IDEA that are considered mature applications. They've been around for 20 years,
Yeah.
I guess.
They're
But they're still, even though they're mature applications, they're still not in full use by all auditors. Somebody just put a comment in, Lotus 123 was released in 1983.
There you go.
83.
And
There we
Quattro Pro as well for the DOS
Yep.
people.
The Wang.
Wikipedia.
Right.
Quattro
Yeah,
Pro.
and you can, just so everyone, if you want to play with it, you can actually download VisiCalc, which when did this come out, right? Around 83. But you can download this still. It's I think it might be here. Sort of waste time on this, sorry. But, anyway, you have the history and all that stuff.
Dan
1979. Yeah, written in 1979. So he's probably the first.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry about that.
Maybe we can get him on a webcast.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, and we used to do a bit of an audit software. We called it. I guess I'm trying to think what we called it. It was the audit software, not roundtable, but anyway, we had a day where we brought a variety of vendors together, and they spoke about their products, but it had to be in more of a practical setting. And
Symposium.
Symposium, thank you. It was back in like 2000. I'm going to say we had many of them. Probably the last one we had those was probably in like the 2005 so range. And again, right around sort of Sarbanes-Oxley, it got very hot. And this was my presentation at the time, is that, at the time, I think there was a movement towards this, but that there's all this data out there. I mean, there's data in your HR databases, ERP, computer logs, etc. And if you could transform that into something where the auditor knew what to review manually and what might be an automated adjustment. So you could even have some automated adjustment reports that kicked out that you didn't even review them. It automatically made adjustments based on the audit report. But that this had work papers in it. It had your risk management, your Sarbanes-Oxley type rules and controls. And it was this whole thing. It was this whole concept of almost like creating an ERP of your audit software. And when you go back to a lot of the ERPs, again, I'm not an expert on this, but my what I've been told is that they all started out as little applications, fixed assets and project accounting and things of that nature, that an SAP or an Oracle or whoever would just buy up over time and say that's a great product and buy it into the fold and become more of this SAP. So the trend that I think the other name for that today in our world is GRC. And it's this sort of a global way of managing your risk within the organization. It has your work papers, it has your SOX controls, it has your data analytics, and they're all kind of feeding off of one another to help the company and get better. So just kind of getting to that first top trend, at least what I've seen whenever I've gone to the shows. Now, mind you, in practice, I don't think we're anywhere near this, but is my opinion. A few companies, I'm sure, are, but this governance, risk, and compliance platform based on ERM or enterprise risk management, it's really where I think ACL and I imagine Caseware and a lot of other product lines are going right now, be able to kind of be that one-stop ERP for the market, and I'm sure the ERPs went through the same trend if we went back and looked at their history.
Well, the ERPs became practical with the massive growth of computers themselves. So they overthrew the legacy systems, and my experiences with IBM 360s and IBM 4381s, where the transactions were only available with direct access for about a 30 to 60 day window. Once they posted to the master file, the transactions were archived out of the system. The ERPs now, you are constantly rerunning the transaction detail. They're always available. So that kind of threw the legacy systems out the window because, say for my background is insurance, so you would audit the claims paid to date. All you could see was the total. You couldn't see all the checks that backed up behind it. So the ERP systems moving forward are taking the advantage of massive computer power, and so you have access to your transactions at all time. You just recalculate it.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, I'm agreed. It's just amazing where things have advanced, yet I don't know how many people have really taken advantage of it, and I have very few clients that run like a daily audit report on a risk. Right. Although I have them, so they do exist.
Well, people think that way, so
yeah.
they ask for it.
Right.
But
agreed.
The reality is the computer has the transaction detail at any point in time. DASD used to be, direct access to data was very expensive. Today it's cheap.
Right, exactly.
Very cheap.
Yep, you had to pack everything, which made it impossible to read elsewhere. And
space was important.
But with that said, back to the thank you, Don. Back to the trends here. What I find is the adoption rates aren't really moving that quickly, and it was interesting though when a requirement comes in like SOX, and if people do remember that time, it was more of a panic and the theory that we almost need a software to do this. And I will say, I mean, I did a Y2K project, and I think I almost don't want to say who I did it for, but what company, but we did it very late, and I don't have the exact months, but I'm going to say we were months away from the deadline, and decided, hey, we better do something. And I do remember we bought a software. A guy came out with this software, and it went through and scanned all of your data files and looked for these things. And we were lucky to find him, and it was a great product, and it worked really well. So, in that case, I mean, I got to say, we had an issue. We had something, where we needed like an audit software to tell us where all the problems were, and it, did its job and did a great job. But I got to say that I think the SOX tools, when it went through that process, it was more like this fellow had already developed the tool because he was only 12 months away from, ending his tool's career. So he had learned a lot about it. Whereas I think with the SOX tools, it was more of just a starting up process for a lot of them on this new concept of making controls. But with all that said, boy, it really helps when a ruling is made that says, auditors need to use computers to look for fraud or look for errors. That kind of changes everything. And I think that we'll talk more about this, but I'm seeing it everywhere because of that. You don't teach it in the schools because, well, it's not on the test, and it's not on the test because it's really not in the rule books, so therefore it's so it all kind of, I think kind of feeds, a lot of it feeds back from there. From that point of view, in my opinion, but yeah, if there was a requirement that said, for example, work paper software or data analytics has to be used, and has to be used in a certain way, I think you would see a lot of auditors implementing it, pretty quickly.
Well, you're seeing. I'm going to refer to the UK Bribery Act of 2010. Now, you can go on the web and you can look at this, but the UK Bribery Act of 2010 brings in the anti-fraud discussion and indicates that for larger companies that the anti-fraud review there should be serious consideration for automating and making it repetitive. There's a lot of other acts out there, obviously the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, SOX, SAS 99, there's a lot of other COSO, U.S. sentencing, they all border on it, but the strongest wording I've seen is the UK Bribery Act, where it says for large companies, you really should be automating it and you should be doing it continuously.
Yeah, and you know, to that point, I mean, it's a little off the beaten path, but so we may as well note it now. Is, you know, I've sent clients out to the UK Bribery Act website because they have they require, I don't know exactly whom, but I believe it's every you know, like local authority needs to send in to them certain data files, and it's a requirement. You know, general ledger, accounts payable, etc. And they say that they analyze that data and look for, you know, issues, but you don't really see that. Yeah, I mean, that's the first I've ever seen of that. Like, we're going to be looking for corruption and bribery in your data, and in order to kind of operate, you need to send us your data.
Exactly.
So it's sort of like going beyond the, you know, not only are you looking for it, but we're actually checking that you're looking for it by checking what you did. So it gets to that continuous audit, you know, continuous management concept that, you know, again, a lot of us are doing, but until it's sort of put in as a rule, it may not be done that as quickly.
Right.
And when it isn't a rule, it becomes more of a business case of, you know, cost benefit. So that's sort of the thought there. But anyway, trend-wise, that's what I've seen. We're kind of relying on, you know, making more of a financial discussion, or you know, then a lot of times on these tool selections. But with that said, I should move on to our first polling question, which that is it. And what I will do is now launch the poll so that people can answer it. And for NASBA requirements, we do require that you answer the poll, and each of the every one of the polls actually, and it's more of just a way of checking attendance, and we have a way of tracking that, and then we send out the CP forms accordingly. The question: what three-letter acronym is used for an integrated risk management software system? So that integrated risk management system, RMS, ABC, GRC, or XYZ? And I saw a couple of questions in the meantime.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Rich. It's probably a good time to look at the questions and see what we've got in there. I think
we've answered everything so far except a question about Teammate, which I may want to say we wait until the work paper section in a few minutes here. But I don't have a lot of experience with Teammate. I've seen it. I did a review of the product when I wrote the buyer's guide many years ago. But being honest, you know, I have not, you know, sat down in the last year and played with the product very much. I didn't know if anyone else had, you know, I know, Jim, you may have some experience with it, or some
actually, I don't have any experience with the software. You know, basically, we've been partnering with Teammate, but you know, it's primarily for the resources, and we are looking for Teammate trainers to help in training users. Right now, I think the only training that's offered is directly through CCH, through the Teammate people. But you know, I would say that you know, if there's any of the users, any of the people that are attending the webinar that have experience with Teammate that might be able to answer the question. Basically, the question is, let's see if I can pull that off and be able to read the whole thing. Yeah, what is your experience with Teammate software suites? One of the best overall or not that great? What would you recommend as a potential bolt-on module or software package for the Teammate suite to ensure the smoothest audit processes? It says we currently use ACL and SAP external of Teammate. So that would be a good question probably to pose to the Teammate help desk, or the Team Connect, which is their online site. They may be able to answer that question in terms of I'm not sure what a bolt-on module is. Can either you or Don maybe explain what that is?
It might be like a facilitative tool, just to like maybe upload
not
documents.
In the core.
Yeah,
okay, so something to
in the core.
Something to integrate it.
Right.
Okay. Now, as far as it being the best software, you know, I really can't comment on that. There are a couple of different alternatives out there. There's Audit Department Manager, I believe, which is a Joe Plyer product. There's I'm not sure. Let's see.
Audit leverage.
Audit leverage. Yeah, Michael
Pentana.
Awad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and in
Pentana.
fact, Caseware
Caseware.
sells electronic work papers as well.
Yep, Caseware, Pentana,
Okay, and
workpapers.com.
we obviously have some Teammate users in there because they're posting. And it says, we use
Yeah.
Teammate for work papers and risk assessment. Teammate really doesn't allow anything to be added in. And somebody
ACL
else
would be a
said,
bolt-on.
yeah, Teammate is a software with a lot of functionality, but with recent version has been full of bugs. So remember, these are comments not coming from either Rich or Don or I, but coming from people that are participating. The new version of, we use ACL. ACL would be a bolt-on. So it looks like we have a lot of Teammate users there. Maybe we can tap some of these to actually do some training.
The feature I like, Jim, is when you have a work paper tool that allows you to drag and drop anything in, whether it's integrated or not. So
Exactly.
the tools that let you take your flow chart, or whatever you have, and drag and drop it in, or your database, of course. So there's some homemade. I know of companies that have Access built. I used one when I was at RSM McGladrey that came from American Express. That was pretty nifty. The Caseware, of course, you can drag and drop any object into it.
Well, I think basically what you're saying, Don, is, and I think this is the trend that might be taking place, is that there's more, integration and a suite. And I know that Don has sort of coined the term the triple crown.
The triple crown,
of
yes.
audit software, and those being data analytics, continuous monitoring, continuous auditing, and audit management.
Yeah, audit management, audit work paper.
Right.
So, every chief auditor needs to quickly assess where they stand, what the vision is, how do I strategically move my function into those three, using those three, where you can integrate, it's great. Where you can stick with one vendor, it's great. And many vendors, more mature vendors out there, are starting to broaden their suite so that they can cover all three.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and close the poll, Rich. I can go ahead and do that and then share the results.
Oh,
and it looks like the majority said GRC.
Yeah, I threw. Yeah, risk management system is RMS, I guess, but I threw that in there.
Governance, risk, and compliance.
Yeah,
GRC.
perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, carry on. Great questions, everyone.
All right, so back we go. So, I wanted to show, just as an example, the evolution of the fraud standards over the last few years, and there may even be a new one now, but, looking back to 77, 89, 97, and then 99, and looking at the number of paragraphs that are written where it's, it's getting much more specific as to what you need to do and the various types of appendices that are added. I know in SAS 99 they had a huge appendix on risk and another one on anti-fraud controls, but yet, not once in there, did it state anything around, as far as I could tell, data analytics. And the only place that they wrote like a follow-up to it around journal entry testing as kind of an audit risk standard, or excuse me, it was like an audit risk alert. So it's not really like a standard or anything like that. But with all that said, I just wanted to note that it's something where it is tough, even when you see a large change in the standards. Data analytics seems to kind of end up on the cutting floor, and that would be one of the main software that you'd use in this case to find fraud. A lot of these top trends, as I move on to the next set here, are a bit data analytic like, and as far as I could tell, and in that. What I found with all the different products, risk management, work paper management, almost like the benefits that they came out with, or a lot of them was like an enhanced reporting, enhanced ability to look at your workflow, dashboarding of everything, and in essence, it was data analytics at the end of the day. So this dashboard, even if you look at the work paper packages, they start off talking about their dashboard, and then they kind of go into, you know, all the nits and gnats about how you can actually put the work papers together and import things, but that's sort of much later in the discussion. So dashboards are cool. They're, you know, useful. I think in many ways they're useful. I wouldn't rely on them completely. You know, I think looking at the actual reports is probably the best. But with that said, you know, moving onward from a training point of view, and this, you know, I can only think about on the data analytic end more than any other, is I think one thing holding it back is that people are not spending the time working with the various types of work paper packages and data analytic packages on a routine basis. You know, every month kind of run something, or you know, every audit running something, obviously. But and you saw that in all of the studies, and because of that, you forget what you did. You know, if 3-4 months goes by, you're going to forget how you ran that. What I'm finding now is I'm even building, you know, in essence, video training or like just-in-time training that I'm actually building after I build a system. So I'll build a little mini system, and then I'll build a videotape to explain how it runs and, you know, the inner workings of it. And for the most part, you would think that that's for the person running it, but it's more for me in my mind, because I can now go back and watch a 10-minute video and know exactly what happened. And in that end, I mean, be it you're running a digital analysis or importing a work paper or whatever, a lot of this software isn't used as much, and because of that, you almost need like a just-in-time training to keep up with it. On the data analytics side, you know, I'm finding it's becoming more expected. I still find, and I think even a quick look at the folks answering the questions on the survey as they register today, Excel is still the dominant tool for data analytics, and most people are using that for, you know, pivot tables or whatever they can get out of it. And you can do quite a bit with Excel. There are Excel add-ins like Topcats and Active Data that makes it a little bit even more powerful. And then there's, you know, jumping up to other packages. But even that's on the data analytics side. I'm even talking more on work paper side, on managing their risks and controls and their findings, and, you know, it's all in Excel. And we always joke, you know, if you want to kill a company, you don't take away SAP. You just kill all of their Excel licenses, and, you know, no one would be able to operate in a day. So, you know, I still think that Excel's across the board the product of choice, and then there's other products that are starting to kind of make their inroads and ways into audit departments and showing them why it's better than Excel, and, you know, that's kind of the process the data analytic tools went down the road of, and now these other tools are going down the road of. But getting back to data analytics being more expected, I'm starting to see more companies even get to a point now where they are deciding up front that they're going to try to get data from a lot of different groups within their company and do a bit of like a central risk assessment. But in addition to that, have kind of a standard way that they're doing location audits. So it may be something where, you know, auditing general ledger, accounts payable, payroll, that kind of thing, that they have like a standard deck of reports that they run, and then all they're doing is kind of tweaking it for the data that they might be getting, but the, you know, it's more of just like an alignment of the system to the data and then running it. And I'm seeing more of that location audit happening where it's like a standard thing, because it's, you know, it may not be the best, it may not be where it's customized for every environment, but at least it's like something going down the road of towards this continuous type of an approach. So, you know, again, as I thought through, you know, some of the trends that were in the past, and then some of the additional trends that are kind of coming forward, these were some of the ones that really jumped out at me and what I'm seeing in the market right now. Just showing a little picture of, you know, what this could look like, and again, this is probably integrating data analytics from your continuous monitoring type of a system. But it also can have all of your risks and controls and work papers and all of that, and you'll see quickly how that could be useful. But what I'm finding is that internal audit departments are building a data mart on the left-hand side of the screen there, they're building a data mart that is actually better than probably the company's data warehouse. I mean, they'll have AP data, GL data, payroll data, etc. Payroll's a little harder to maintain, but some of the others that goes back for years beyond what anyone really is keeping right now in the company. Got to be a little careful on the security of that, but beyond that, they can then run a lot of analytics. And if they're running it for what I find is you run it for a department, you find a few things with it, and then the department then says, hey, can we have a local analytic toolkit that we could run? And then that becomes kind of the next part in the process. And then you could have a lot of people that are using that toolkit and improving it for you. And if you can go across the world with it, let's say in your company, you'd be able to get a lot of feedback from a lot of different groups that you then feed back into your system and make better for everybody. So some of the things, what you'll find is you'll have a group that uses it a lot more than others, and they'll give lots of feedback, and that will benefit the others that didn't give much feedback at all. But again, it helps the audit process. And I'm showing this because I'm seeing this more and more. I mean, it gets to this whole GRC concept. It gets to this, take away data analytics. We're not looking at ERP system data. Now imagine this as your Sarbanes-Oxley controls. It's pretty much the same. We're keeping a data mart of all these items and have the best one, and then they have kind of their local toolkit of this, but it gets fed back, and we go from there. So it is something that I'm seeing more and more, and it cuts across all of the different types of analytic tools. And I believe, Jim, are you jumping in at this point to say a few things?
Yeah, actually I am. Thanks for mentioning that, Rich. And there are some questions coming in. And one question wanted to know what the group thinks about continuous auditing using data analytics. So I sent that to everybody that's in the group, and we'll see what kind of feedback. But at this point, I wanted to talk about the auditor's role. And basically, internal auditors must have sufficient knowledge of available technology based on technology-based audit techniques to perform their assigned work. Now, this is not like the fraud standard where it says they must incorporate techniques into their audit work programs and risk analysis. This is more like at a department level, and correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but basically it's talking about the knowledge that is required of auditors, and it says that you have to have within your department. It doesn't mean that every single auditor on staff has to have that technology-based audit technique knowledge, but really department-wide, and I think that that's something that maybe the profession should take a look at, because it's becoming, required that everybody really have these kinds of skills to address the issue.
It's becoming a core competency.
Yeah.
And so the old champion, one guy can do the work for 50, the guru, as I referred to, more and more. As people come out of school and are being looked at in the job market, they're being evaluated on the core competencies of audit techniques. So
I think that's
I am an author on the data analysis technologies. I'm one of the authors. So
that's what I was going to mention. There's two documents there, and I think basically what Don was referring to is that this is a trend that's taking place in the marketplace, in the audit marketplace. But there are two documents that I would highly recommend that you get a hold of. If you're a member of the IIA, the Data Analysis Technologies Global Technology Audit Guide, and Don was a contributor to that. And then on the ISACA side, there's a white paper out there, Data Analytics, A Practical Approach, and we actually have one of the co-authors of that, Rich Lanza, participated in that. So we've got these two documents, which I think are great documents, and you should have them within your toolkit. And if you're a member of either organization, you can download those free of charge. If you're not a member, they do charge you, but I think that the cost of them is well worth it. So if you would just advance the slide now, Rich. I think the next slide covers the 2012 survey on using data analysis software. We did conduct a survey, and we closed that out just recently, and we had over 550 auditors that completed the survey, and there's some stats there. And this was basically an update on a survey that we conducted in 2010. And we did find that more auditors are recognizing the benefits of data analysis audit software tools and use them in both audit planning as well as field work. But there are still some areas where there's issues that impact widespread usage. But you can see from the statistics there that it's happening. We're seeing more auditors are using it. However, they're using mainly on an ad hoc basis, which Rich mentioned before. In other words, more auditors are using Excel. We are seeing some trends in ACL and IDEA, but still most auditors are very comfortable with using Excel, so they're either using Excel or they're using an Excel add-in such as Active Data or Top Cats. Most of the audit staff, you're all doing the data analysis internally. You're not outsourcing it to others. We have the majority using ACL, but we do have a number that are using Access as well as IDEA. And the main reason for not using it on all audits, we're finding, is that staff is not receiving the training. And of course the greatest benefit, which we anticipated, is that you can look at an entire population, and that is becoming mandatory. Performance objectives and compensation, they're not tied together, so if you're using data analytics, don't expect to have a huge bump in pay. But I think that that's something that perhaps we'll see as a trend as we have more auditors that are required to have the data technology skills. More auditors would be using data analytics if audit programs included steps, and ACL has taken some steps to provide data analytic enabled audit programs, and we're looking at doing that with Auditnet as well as partnering with audit software as well as with other industry subject matter experts. And they also said that they would use a script library if it were available. So that's basically, what an update on the survey. And then I think the next thing that we have is we have audit software technology overview. And I'm not going to go into detail on these, but basically these are the different blocks that you'll see that Rich talked about earlier in terms of the types of audit software that are out there. So risk management, work management, controls monitoring, text search, these things are all being used, research, benchmarking, and then the grand poobah, which is data analytics. So I think that you'll find, as Rich goes over the next slide, he'll get into the details and stuff that's really included in the software buyer's guide. And at this point, I'll turn it back to you, Rich. But I think I'll be monitoring the questions, keep them coming in, and we'll share them with you after our next poll. Rich?
Great. Thanks a lot, Jim. And so this was the listing that I had in the buyer's guide, which, if you look at it, is very close, if not exact, to what Jim has. And things haven't changed that much. I mean, which is good, and that way we can kind of monitor and take a look at it. So I'm going to go through each section, and maybe before I do that, let me just step back one second. For the most part, there's risk management, which is more of like the Sarbanes-Oxley control management tools, monitoring the various types of controls that are key controls, ones that have issues, etc. Work management and collaboration is anything really to help auditors work with one another. And I think one of them right here is good old GoToWebinar and GoToMeeting, and it's amazing what you can do over the web now that a long time ago when you had to get on a plane and fly out to someone to show them how things worked. And but again, it gets more to the work papers.
SurveyMonkey.
Yeah, SurveyMonkey is another one.
Yeah.
Yep, agreed. And getting to like the assessment tools, right? SurveyMonkey, other types of ways of tabulating employee views, and views on controls, on fraud, whatever. Data analytics, continuous control monitoring, and I put them together, and we'll explain why. And text searching is part of data analytics, but I pulled it out on its own because it just seems to be its own separate. I have to be honest, I don't have a whole lot of text search tools that I use or even know of, and I tend to use tools like ACL or some text editor type tools when I need to, but you know, basic. And I've seen some people that use some very advanced tools there, but that's kind of building its own market. And then research and benchmarking of kind of using that external knowledge and bringing it into the fold, and be it a certified fraud examiner survey or other data that's tabulated on the audit market, which, you know, we'll talk about. All of that kind of comes into play here. Right, so I'm going to continue on, just kind of going through these a little bit more in detail and just more quickly going through some of the definitions of what is this stuff. You know, I worked with a few of these tools, and then actually took a look at a few others as part of the Buyer's Guide book. And you know, for the most part, this was a way of tracking in a database or other way your Sarbanes-Oxley controls and issues around the controls and your testing of those controls and any sort of policy management that you might have around those controls. They're all kind of saved in the central location. It's like a library of your company's controls, especially as it related to Sarbanes-Oxley. But that started to grow, and you know, we'll kind of move on here to this, you know, what is the process of setting it up. But it started to grow more to this overall enterprise risk management. So it's not just Sarbanes-Oxley. It became more of, you know, every risk for the company. And I think when you look through all these planning, all these process steps, from planning to testing, etc., I think a lot of it does boil back down to the ultimate reporting. And you know, why is that? I think especially for Sarbanes-Oxley, one of the big things when we were working on our compliance effort was getting all the information in there and just knowing who hadn't, you know, followed up on their data, you know, what was still outstanding, that kind of thing. And the reporting of that on a weekly basis was just so critical. But to do that manually was very difficult, you know, and pulling it together from a lot of different organizations. So, you know, you could kind of see how the reporting part of it, even though it's the last part, it was kind of driving a lot of, you know, why we had this thing in the first place. And it gets to, with these risk management tools or with a audit work paper tool, which, you know, we'll talk about quickly next. You know, a lot of those tools, be it Pentana, Audit Leverage is another good example of this. I'm not going to say Teammate falls into this category as much, but you know, could, I suppose. You know, I'm not so much sure about Caseware, but in essence, some of the tools are more of a document management type tool, where it's really just maintaining all of these documents for you, and it organizes it and all that good stuff. And it probably has a way of searching that information as well. So now it's like a text editor type tool where it can kind of search through and find a control or risk or whatever you were looking for. But if you can put that into a database where an actual test is now a data field in a table called test, and a result of that test is saved in another table called results, you know, and that kind of thing, you're going to get a much more consistent way of auditing. So instead of auditors now having Word documents and Excel documents and all this freedom, we're now going to kind of lock it down and tell you, kind of like an accounts payable payment, when you enter in this control, risk, test, whatever, it's going to be entered in like an accounts payable payment. It, you know, the invoice date goes there, the amount goes here, etc. And so, you know, the value of that, though, is once it's in there, you can very quickly start reporting on it. You could create another audit work program using that database. It's very helpful in getting a dashboard rolling, as we all know is useful. Helps you to continuous monitor things because it's sort of always updated 24/7. You know, so it's a much better data set to work with. If that's buried in a bunch of Excel and Word documents, it's a lot harder to work with, and hence that's kind of the value of moving to this. But I spend some time on this point because there's a lot of groups out there that for this topic of Sarbanes-Oxley controls, or this next topic here of work collaboration and management, you know, a lot of it comes down to, do you just want to manage your work papers, or do you want to put it into a database of risk control test result and findings and that kind of thing? So you know, that's a big question for everyone to answer. In looking at the Teammate, Pentana, gosh, Audit Leverage, try to list them all. Thomson Reuters has a product, Caseware has a product. You know, this is sort of the products where you're doing your audit planning in the products. You're managing documentation around the audit. You can do fraud case management in there. There's some resource planning.
You also have version control in there. Version control and change control, and a lot of security pieces come in, locking it out 30 days after the audit. You know, so this list, you know, can grow.
Yeah, big time, big time.
Big time.
And agreed. And I think a lot of this gets down to just managing sort of the whole audit department with like an ERP. I mean, if there was an ERP for the audit department, this is trying to do it as best as can. And I know that, you know, Caseware works with IDEA. It's very integrated, as I understand. And I haven't really seen ACL and workpapers.com, but I assume that they're pretty integrated. So, you know, data analytics could be kind of thrown in as a integrated piece of this or bolt-on of this as well. You know, looking at the wireless networking, I mean, there are some products out there where you could create like a secure wireless network in a room, and I'll be honest, it's in this book here, but I forget the name of it. It's so long ago. But you know, it's just things like that where it's very audit specific, but it really does help collaboration. I'm a big believer in videotaping things, and I use a product called Camtasia, C-A-M-T-A-S-I-A. And they're from the makers of a product called Snagit, which a lot of people have Snagit. So, you know, again, training development, you could do quite a bit of video-based development using those products. Again, other information in here, but a lot of this comes down to, do you want to maintain it in a work, you know, in kind of a database, or do you want to manage it in a, you know, in more of a document management type system? So at this point, I was going to just jump over to the next polling question again for our NASBA regulation.
Well, you also have cloud computing on your list. You know, cloud computing, and I also create videos, and they are in the cloud. In the Amazon cloud is where I actually store them. So again, this list, you know, could be very long.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, of all the things you have to look at.
Right, and what's sad, we'll talk more about it, but you know, how many of these things haven't even been looked at, you know, by most audit departments. It's amazing. But again, let me jump over to this next polling question and launch this one. The polling question, we'll take a look at the questions if people want to list the questions out as well as we go along here. But the polling question is, where would an issue tracking software best be classified in the list of software provided in the webinar? Is it audit work papers, data analysis, research and benchmarking, or risk management? Taking a look at some of the questions kind of coming in here.
I think we got a lot of feedback, Rich, on the continuous auditing.
I must be, yeah, it sounds great, thank you.
Yeah.
Where do you see that, though?
Pull the questions. You can pull that questions tab.
Yep.
Right out. And then you can...
there we go. You know what? I needed to sort it by time. For some reason it got sorted a different way.
And you can adjust those columns as well.
Okay.
The size of the columns.
Sounds great.
Okay.
All right, so back to these questions. So one question here is internet-based audit work papers available? I see, Jim, you did answer that one. ACL work papers is web-based. I know that I believe like a Thomson Reuters would make theirs web-based. I'm pretty sure. I know Pentana they will kind of like offer it in the cloud as well, and probably a lot of others are. And Don mentioned that. Like it seems like a lot of these. It was sort of a debate on the audit work papers, and without going too far into it, it was something where a lot of people wanted to be on the web, and a lot of people wanted it local. And what they said was having it on the web was a problem because they would go out in the field and it was tough to get web connection, and then but yet the local kind of version of it always had to be uploaded, and that could create issues as well. So I don't know what thoughts are there, but what I found was that a lot of people kind of wanted both, where they wanted internet connection, but they wanted to be able to take stuff in the field and kind of work with it on their own. So those are some of the thoughts that I have on that topic.
Yeah, a check-out, a check-in feature.
Got it.
Is what they're referring to. So it shows that they checked it out.
Got it. Does ACL work papers include internal audit management and time reporting? I don't know. To be honest with you. I'm just taking a look here at some. All right.
It's an alternative to Teammate, obviously, and I don't know. I know it's web-based. I know the developer of the software, and I think it does have some time management included in it as well.
Yeah, and
that's something probably to look at in terms of the buyer's guide. I think the buyer's guide has sort of a checklist of some of the items that you might be looking for in the different areas.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. What we'll do is when we come back, I'll just quickly show that to everyone so you see it, see what we're talking about here. But anyway, let me close the poll out here. Do appreciate you filling that out, and I will share that with everyone. And yeah, it was a little bit of a trick question. I think either A or C is correct. I mean, issue tracking can relate to risk management, could also be in audit work papers. I mean, I guess you could, in data analysis, you could use analysis of it, but probably not so much there, or benchmarking. But yeah, no, risk management or audit work papers would be the best answer there. Let me hide that. And when you get back to the screen here, you'll see a kind of a web version of the buyer's guide. You'll get this as an Adobe document. Let me see if I can make this a bit smaller so you can see it. And for the most part, without going through it all, we kind of have a forward section here that goes through some best practice. Goes through some best practices. What holds things back, what moves it forward, and I think it's a lot of details of what we are talking about today. We then talk about the product functionality, which I agree, Jim, it is a checklist of things you should be looking for in these products. And it's written 5 years ago, so I mean, I think there are some new concepts to include. But, I got to say the basics is a great place to start, and probably a lot of what was talked about in '08 was the basics. We do have kind of a selection guide, how you might want to negotiate things, etc. And then we just have a listing of all the vendors, and I'll just try to go to like one page, just so you get an idea of it. Just try to, oh, sorry here, folks, Information Active would be one. They produce active data. Their address is, I'm sure, wrong, and people have moved on, I could see. But, for the most part, it gives a pretty decent idea of them. InfoSpace, I think, was one that did more of like web searching, that kind of thing. So various products here. I think there was about 150 vendors that you can look at, and they are all categorized by product for you in the product functionality section as well. All right. So getting back to the presentation here, just wanting to kind of be cognizant of time as well and continue through this. Top benefits of the work management tools. I mean, I think we've been talking through some of them, but I've struggled a little bit on the audit work paper tools when it's a small department, 2 to 5, 2 to 10 people, of seeing where audit work papers has a huge impact on their activities. And I think a lot of people go through this discussion. I think when you talk cost-benefit analysis, data analytics is the best place to start. A few duplicate payments and you've paid for your entire process. Whereas with the work management tools, it's a lot harder. I mean, you can't say we were able to become so efficient that we could drop 2 auditors because our audit work paper management system was managing everything for us. With that said, especially as you get into larger organizations all around the globe and et cetera, it does become almost like a useful, if not essential tool. A lot less travel, a lot less paper pushing, a lot of reviews and such can be done online, but also if they lose anything or a laptop gets lost, as some of the comments were coming over, you don't have to worry about updating your software or anything like that. So similarly, if this stuff is saved in a work management tool, you can lose your work paper binder and you'll still have a copy of it back at the office. So some real good benefits there. And just kind of rounding out some of the final sections here, we have the employee assessment tools, which I just wanted to kind of flip to the next slide here to show you this. I don't know if people remember these, but they were these. I don't know if people are still using these, but they're wireless type terminals that you can use to collect input from people in a meeting, but to do so in a very anonymous way. And you've probably seen them on TV shows like game shows and that kind of thing. But you can use it in your own control self-assessment, and I think this was a whole pocket of as Don put or said, surveys. It was a whole way of kind of measuring employee assessment of controls, of their feelings towards risk and fraud and that kind of thing. And I even saw a fraud survey tool out there many years back in the Sarbanes-Oxley era, but it went out of business. But it was a concept of actually sending out surveys to people throughout the company and building like a heat map for fraud based on what people were telling you. And some of the reporting systems here, like Ethics Line from the ACFE or Ethics Point, and there's many others, I'm sure, they allow you to kind of manage your case management of fraud. And they're useful, interesting kind of tools, I think, in that you could use this data to kind of create that heat map that we're talking about. We just talked about that one there. Again, kind of jumping in now to data analytics, which is something that I think a lot of people said, it's sort of seen throughout. It's sort of that central figure. And I think, too, looking back on the products, it's been around the longest. ACL and IDEA have been talking audit software since, what is it, 83 or something?
Yeah, 25 years.
25 years. So it's something where they've been speaking about that a lot longer than audit work papers, let's say. So with that said, the types of tools that you can get here, many of the tools cover a lot of these different categories, but these are the categories that we talk about in the book. And query tools, which, again, in ACL and IDEA, Excel even could fit into financial statement analysis tools. There's actually tools out there where you can import your financial statements and it'll give you all of these ratios and other information. Data mining products, which allow you to just kind of virtually go into your, drill down into your data, summarize data differently. I'm really big on the dashboarding in that, almost every system has to have some dashboard or the client isn't happy. And I think that no matter if it's work papers or risk management or whatever, there's got to be some sort of a dashboard at the end of the day. So that fits into it and needs to be fed by these query tools. Then you get into kind of the automated routines, which would be kind of smaller versions of continuous monitoring. There are Excel audit tools out there where you can audit Excel spreadsheets. So I know we've done some webinars in the past, Jim and I, and actually even had some presentations of those tools. we had called detailed record analyzers. We're going to skip over that one, but text search tools is one where, again, it's data analytics, but it's starting to look at email files and other types of files that are within an organization.
Well, you even have in data files, you have character-based fields like description, things like that. And for example, idea allows that field to be 500 characters long. So I actually built a script, had it built by our tech support to parse each word out, put it into a separate database, and summarize and give you a count of how many times that word actually appears. So, some of the tools help you manage text search as well.
Great. So, I feel though that data should extend beyond ERP data, which is what most of us audit. I mean, I'll admit that's where I spend 95% of my time. But there's computer logs, which actually I do spend a little bit of my time on, and all these other databases out there that could be within your company, be it an audit work paper database or external databases. And my only point of putting this in the buyer's guide is to say that, kind of look beyond the ERP and see what other data for that business process might be useful and could be utilized. Now, where is data analytics used? You'll see this is from the Auditnet state of the data analytic use, and this is where what I'm finding is payables tends to be the main dominant one, general ledger second, receivables and inventory kind of rounding it out. But payables and general ledger, I mean, if it's something where if you are starting up an analytics program, you probably will get the most bang for your buck in those areas. I mean, payables for sure, because it'll be money that probably you'll find and can come back to you. But in general ledger, also in just kind of understanding the entire business, you could do a lot of risk assessment of the entire company if you can get your general ledger from all of the companies. And I didn't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I did want to kind of note that the process to kind of running your data, I think for auditors is a little bit different. I mean, I think you have to kind of start out with your audit objective in mind, then kind of dive into, what reports should we run that would match to that objective, and based on that, what data do I need, and then you run it and all that. But it's all based on, what is that audit objective in the beginning, and from there I see a lot of people that will immediately just say, like, I'm going to run these audit reports, like these standard audit reports for my business process, and they kind of jump to step 7 without thinking about all the other steps. And I kind of urge you to think through that process, not spend too much time on it, but did want to give you kind of my perspective that data analytics I think follows more of this process than any other. And from a features point of view, I have this out on, I have this data analytics software comparison tool. I can send this to you. I mean, I think it's out on auditsoftware.net right now that you can download it as well. It's a link out there, but we can try to get it in the links and files that we send out for this session. It went through all the different data analytic products and tried its best to kind of map off, who does what. And I think, I even had a guide where I showed how in Excel you can like do everything that you're doing in ACL, for example. Everything is a kind of an overstatement, but it's something where you can kind of play with Excel and get it to do a lot for you, but it's still never going to kind of replace a lot of these other products out there. But I think I'll say this later, but I'll just note it now, is I still think a great way to go is have everyone in the department use some data analytics. And if the starting point is Excel for everybody, because that's just what everyone's comfortable with, that might be better than nothing. And have a bit of a training program or expectations in data analytics around Excel itself. But because you can do quite a bit with it. But I did want to note, as you look at that guide that I can send you as well that looks at all the different products, they're not that far off of one another. There are a couple of exceptions, but they're not that far off. Yeah, I mean, some of the considerations when selecting a tool, I obviously wanted to note this somewhere in our discussion of all the different types of products out there, but I really wanted to jump quickly to this decision analysis tool that Don, probably you could speak to, but I believe it's
I created
right
that.
now. Yeah, thanks.
But the big difference, the big difference in tools rests in the protection of the client data, as well as in the documentation of the work the auditor performed. So when Excel can tell me what work was performed, I might look at it differently than I look at IDEA.
Right.
Not only can I look at it, it's documented there for me. So those of you that have a QA process, you know how difficult it can be to get an audit report issued when QA can't understand how you performed your analytics. I also just helped a small investigator with a small fraud, and she was having difficulty getting the state to prosecute because they couldn't understand how she did the analysis. So, and for a $30,000 fraud, they were pretty much concerned that they were going to spend more money trying to try a case than it was worth. So this paper that's on the screen, you can see, you can download it. It is totally free. I have some 52 steps to analyze. You can't see all of it on the screen, but you also get a 12-page document that basically is a process to implement data analytics into your function. Both of those are free. They're somewhat product not specific, so they're a great tool. And you can see in this one, little irony is that is an Excel spreadsheet that the kick the tires paper matrix is running in.
Right.
So
right.
A little humor there.
Right. And this is based on more data analytics, right? Am I right in saying that?
This is specifically data analytics.
Okay.
It's not
Just checking.
really to monitoring and to electronic work papers. And basically it's broken down into 4 categories. Obviously you have some objective, as Rich was saying on a previous slide. What is your strategic objective? What are you trying? What is your vision? The second piece is, the second part is, which you can just see at the bottom, is how are you going to get whatever that vision, how are you going to get it into your function? So do you need some help, or do you have the people and time to do it? The third section, which is the biggest section, actually goes to the core features and functions of data analysis software: sampling, merging, data size, pivot table, stratification. All of that is spelled out in there. And then the last piece, smaller piece, is what is that going to cost? How do you determine, a comparison of cost? So that whole work paper is there, and if you download it, you actually get an Excel spreadsheet, and you can modify the spreadsheet and do your analysis there. So.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Don. And yeah, I wanted to provide that to everyone. There's a little more thought in the data analytic area when it comes to selections, and therefore, there's some more info there, so I wanted to provide that out. Moving on to the other areas, continuous controls monitoring, data change tracking, business rules. What I thought about continuous controls monitoring is that I think it breaks into 2 different tool types. I think there's one that's more of the business rules, like it'll run reports around duplicate payments and items that are over a certain dollar limit and that kind of thing. It's a business rule. But then there's just data change tracking, and there are tools out there that will just say that the data in that field was changed, where we'll say it was changed by this application or this person or whatever, but it is literally just tracking all of the changes within data, and to some companies that's very important to them. It's a great risk to them, that kind of thing. And but I see them as two different tool sets. One is almost a logging of all data changes, and one of them is the business rules. But when you talk about CCM or continuous control auditing or whatever, it's usually the business rule discussion is what most people focus on. From a benefits point of view, and making a continuous point of view, I'm kind of jumping through a little quickly because I just want to be cognizant of the time. But I think for the most part, it's taking data analytics that you've been running on a consistent basis, if you will, at a certain location, say accounts payable or general ledger, and just deciding, we really should be rolling this out across the board and running it more continuously. But usually because the audit department, the auditee in this case, kind of wants it. It's something that they feel is necessary, and it's such a key control or risk and control that they want to monitor it, and then they start monitoring it, and then you're kind of coming in as audit to kick the tires and take a look periodically. That's how I've seen it grow organically. I mean, there are other approaches, which is, you must do this, and you must run this application, and you must take a look at these reports that kick out. But I'm not sure that sticks as well as having management accept it and work with it. Yeah.
Can I inject my
Please.
2 cents? So basically, the data analytics and the monitoring tools kind of bolt together. So regardless of what you're doing to run the analytics, instead of having the results returned back to the auditor, you can actually, with a continuous monitoring system, you can actually have the results sent directly to the audit client. And there's some rules put in there, and maybe the audit client has 3 days to respond back as to whether or not that truly was a duplicate payment or not. So the auditor, of course, has access to the system and can see if that user even goes into the system to even check to see that they have messages or work items to be done. So the monitoring becomes kind of a workflow distribution process, and yes, whether the auditor is involved into that process or not is an individual company decision, but typically you see auditors starting these processes in the business unit as they become trained and accustomed to them, start to grow them, their own direction. Truly monitoring systems that are just about performance and hitting peaks, are a slightly different animal, as Rich has pointed out, than the ones that are actually saying, I see an anomaly and I need a person to go check that anomaly out. So that's how they fit together. And in many cases, you don't have to have a specific analytic engine to run the monitoring piece. So if you use IDEA Caseware's monitoring, Caseware Monitor, you can have ACL as your engine, you could have Excel as your engine, you could have SAS as your engine. So they're interchangeable to a large degree.
All right.
Is that confusing?
No, not at all. I think it's
Okay.
good. I think it's good.
So, and of course the front end I always show is the work papers. So you start with the work papers with pulling your audit program, say from Auditnet or from a past audit, and then you start to look at your risks. You decide which audits to move forward. You start to then either do it manually if it's a paper process, or you do it automated if you can get the data. That's a combination. And then that middle piece pushes to the monitor. Now I need to get this information to the client to see what the client thinks, And of course it documents, and you can escalate. You can escalate it over that person's head if they fail to respond. So I try to keep it simple that way because people get very confused as to whether what piece you're talking about.
Got it. Agreed. Yeah, I think I'm mostly talking about the data side of it, but agreed. I think it integrates to all these others, and it gets to this whole GRC thing.
Exactly.
All right, continuing on. So these are some of the data mart and server benefits. Your centralized data, you have backups there, audit knowledge is in one place, you have all your scripts and macros in one place, you can secure and user manage it down to, Don only being able to do his component audit test in his location, whereas audit can review everything. Obviously there's better data at the local level, and moving to a server is going to get you a lot more faster processing speed. Although
Well, it
pieces
may
are
not be the
quicker.
same data as at the business unit, Rich, which is auditors need to be aware that who owns the data mart can put data cleaning rules in. So if you're actually auditing, say, accounts payable, but you're actually going to a data mart to pull your data, you may find that it does not exactly, bit by bit match the business unit, because the data mart unit has said, you know what, these three vendors are all the same vendor, so I have a rule that whenever I see one or a variation of the other, I'm going to pull that data together under one vendor, and this is the vendor. And the auditor thinks that, that the business unit did that, when in fact the data mart did it. So that's why software vendors like IDEA recommend that your best source of data is back to the source, depending on what your objective is, but in many cases that you want that. In fact, data marts may have a rule that no duplicate payments can be made, so they're gonna modify that.
Right.
Where the source will show the duplicate payment.
Right. And just moving on to the next slide, as I've been watching, the various comments come in from folks, what I'm kind of seeing on the continuous auditing side is most audits don't really require it. I mean, to be that updated, a daily feed, and jumping on issues before they're issues. I mean, again, I know someone that runs a report every day and then acts on that report every day before issues happen. So before anything's paid, the item will actually kick out, flag, and she'll address it. But you don't see that very often, in a lot of shops, and most of the feedback coming in is that things are done monthly or so, and even that is quite amazing, for a lot of the groups out there. So again, I think that while there's some great benefits to it, not all audit audit areas require it, and for the most part, it can be very selective at times at some companies as to where they really want to spend the time. And I think that gets to the whole ROI of it. Like, again, there isn't a requirement that says that this has to happen, so there's no standard that says it. So you really get into this ROI discussion, as we said, and the return on investment when you're talking to information technology or others in the company. You almost want to do those smaller sample audits first, and based on that, show you've saved the company $1 million or $100,000 or whatever, and by using that, then say, if we were doing this more continuously, we'd be able to kind of capture that data on a more consistent basis, and I think that that's where I'm starting to see more of a focus right now is doing more of almost like a sample continuous monitoring process. Even vendors that are willing to do it in kind of a sample way, if you will, just to prove the value of it. And then once the value is proven, then it's pretty easy to move from that point of view. I just wanted to round out this last one. These are just some of the tools out there that you can get your information from. I'm starting to use more and more of company research type tools and data, Social Security data rules that you can actually get like something like a death master of every person that has passed away per the Social Security records in the United States, and that's a great database to bump Social Security numbers against, and there are various other tools, but for the most part, it's grabbing external data, be it for financial statement information, for things like Jim's Auditnet's audit program library, and kind of bringing that and using that as part of your audit process. So I did want to mention that tool, that I see it as a tool, but yet probably not one that's discussed as often as data analytics. But without further ado, let me jump into going back to our polling questions. I just wanted to bring up the third polling question before we get into the final section. What is the first step in running? What is the first step in running a data analytic test as stated in the webinar? Is it first set data requirements of what data you need? Is it know your audit objectives to test? Is it edit your scripts? Or is it request data? So those are the four sections, and if you can answer that. And just jumping over to the questions, I've been sorry here, I'm just going in to take a look. Yeah, some people noting that they're doing continuous monitoring every few months or so, mostly running ACL reports and sending them off to people. Some people are using IDEA, to produce the continuous auditing is produced by IDEA. They're doing a lot of 100% type testing. I'm trying to think here if I'm missing anything, but I think I'm getting most. Some people are using. A lot of people are using Teammate. A few people are using Thomson Reuters risk management product. All right. One question here, I like this one, seeing that audit is heading in the direction of continuous auditing, is it then right for internal audit staff to have access to systems only on a need-to-have basis, or should this be opened up? And this is probably something for others to think about as well and comment on. I definitely think it should be opened up. I mean, you have to be a bit careful in that you don't want to give everyone access to all data within audit, but at the same time, I think that probably somebody in audit should have access to data about key business processes within the company. Again, even if not everyone can look at it, a few of you should be able to.
Rich,
yeah.
I think that Don has some thoughts on this. We were just discussing this the other day on who should have access to what, and how do you ensure that you can get access?
Well, most companies should, as part of their general controls, their IT general controls, should have an access to data policy. Many of them have actually stretched that definition to not just how do you get access to the data, but how do you transmit, how do you transport, and how do you save data. So companies, the larger companies, but I've seen it at small companies, they're very specific as to what the auditor can do with the data once it's properly approved for them to have it. I've never worked in an environment where the auditor could just walk on down to the IT room and get their own data. It always had to be on the proper form, approved by the proper level, sometimes approved by the database owner, sometimes, and then that's given to the administrator to pull. In this day and age with private identifiable information, PII, there's a lot of things hit the news when that information is out in the open. So.
Good. Great. Yeah. No. Thank you. Yeah. And I know the internal auditor this month has big data on their homepage there. On the cover.
Magazine.
Yeah, and talking about
magazine.
Exactly, and talking about all the different types of security and other controls that you should be thinking about when basically setting up kind of like when dealing with big data, but it seemed to be more along the lines of when setting up your audit data warehouse. So probably some good thoughts there as well.
For the big data, the interesting piece of that, and you kind of alluded on it on a couple of slides, is the fact that in this day and age you can find ways to relate data from different systems, say social systems, and actually merge and join those records together to to find out things about people or processes or clients that you could not get before. So I think a lot of it is, in the beginning, just being able to join two files was pretty exciting stuff. Now they're finding ways to join files that are not so related. So,
Right.
and that's the definition of big data.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that was some of the, when we took the vendor master file and matched it to the employee master file.
That was exciting stuff.
That was exciting stuff. No one thought of that one.
Yeah, but now they're going out there on, on the social media and adding to your employee record all the different social sites that you frequent on a regular basis.
Right.
And your
Amazing.
comments and what you said or didn't say.
Right.
And they're doing analysis on it. That's big data. Big data doesn't mean just a big pile of data. It means that we're doing things in a totally different way with the capabilities. The in-process memory, everybody says it's going to flip our world totally around 180 degrees. So starting to see that.
Yeah, I am as well. Yeah, agreed. Well, anyway, moving on here. I just wanted to, I closed the poll. Pretty much everyone got it. It's know your audit objective to test was the starter. And so that was the poll. And getting back to the presentation, kind of rounding out the final section here, what's holding it back, what moves it forward. And I think you got a lot of that from our discussion today, but we'll round it out here. I think that a lot of it comes down to leadership within the organization, and you'll see here, this is Auditnet's technology tool survey that was just recently released. And what's what factors do you see as the biggest influence towards moving towards automated anything, in the group? And, leadership was there, kind of setting up the planning, setting up the financial resources was there. I mean, it's something where, as you're looking at this, let's kind of move on to some of the other slides. You'll notice here, again, cost of the software, having auditors with the right skills, high quality, low cost training. This is something that was driving it, and this is from a data analytics survey that Jim and I did at a webinar probably about 6 or 7 months ago. And again, it's kind of still bringing up the senior level support. That's definitely there. I think getting people trained and keeping them trained is sort of the issue. I mean, the cost of the software is pretty easy to make up if you do a good couple of audits, but getting people trained up is sort of some of the harder parts. Again, just wanted to start out with some of these slides first just to get you an idea, why are you not using data analytics? And like one of the questions came in, getting the data, data analysis is not integrated into our audit process. That's part of the reasoning. But just getting the data, data not available for all audits, data not at an easily retrievable format. I think they said data owners are reluctant to allow auditors access to data. Right? That's 50% of the pie. You need a
charter statement then. You need that in your audit charter that you should be allowed access to people and data. And
yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
So anyway, moving on. So other inhibitors. So I think from a data analytics side, I guess getting data is a big component here. I'm just kind of trying to summarize up some of the thoughts from these slides here. We'll talk more about it, but senior level support obviously, and keeping people trained. And and I think it some of the other thoughts that I've had around it, and this gets to data analytics, but just kind of to computers in general. I think a lot of people are just too busy these days. I mean, I'm seeing audit departments shrinking, being merged. When I learned ACL 20 years ago, I started my first day and they said, we don't know what to do with you, so why don't you go work with that software product on the shelf over there? And you don't really hear that much anymore in audit departments. So it's not a lot of time to learn it. You need to kind of learn quickly or have somebody do it for you, really. I think there is a fear of numbers, a fear of working with data, a fear of computers to some extent. That they, a lot of people will, they'll be able to work their iPod or iPhone, but will get pretty scared when you say, we're going to go write a script, and the script or macro is going to run a bunch of reports for you. I'm not seeing it taught in schools, as we said before. It's, I think based more on if it was a rule that said you had to do this per the SEC or PCAOB or whoever, it would be everywhere. It would be something that would be in every professor's discussion. And I think setting up like one champion, as Don mentioned, I agree. I think everyone should learn the products. A lot of companies are afraid to jump in with both feet, so they kind of started off with a champion approach, but you definitely want to have a few champions, because I can tell you, as I've moved through my career, company automation of their department would kind of go up and then down if I didn't train enough people around me before I left, kind of.
Yeah, and if the champion leaves, like Rich.
What
do they do? I have two more for this, and
please.
kind of summarizing what you have there. First of all, I see, especially the leaders of the function, lack a vision of how they want to work and how they should work, and they also lack the ability to sell or convince others that that is the way audit needs to work. So that's my first one, so that vision statement. The second thing that I see is maybe they've seen it, maybe they've experienced it at other functions, but they're not capable of building the roadmap that fits for their function to get it done. That paper that was referenced that you can download, that talks about the roadmap. It basically builds the roadmap of what you need to know to move your function forward. And so those are two things. I mean, Rich certainly has got those in there, but I summarize it as lack of vision, lack of roadmap. Yeah, I'm sure Rich would like to help you build both of those if you don't have those.
Yeah,
and for IDEA, I would do the same thing.
Exactly.
That's what I do every day.
Exactly. And I agree with you, and I think in a lot of cases when I do show up, I'm a more or less of a cheerleader than I am a data technician at times, because it is more of selling the benefits and talking to what you can do and opening people's eyes to it.
Oh, young people are fearless, Rich.
Yeah.
I've seen them just jump in and start wailing away, and if they're using Excel, that's a problem. If you're using, the professional built tools like ACL and IDEA, especially IDEA, that's not a problem. They're not going to be able to do that much damage.
Right.
But young people, more and more, they are getting it in school. We have over 200 schools that we work with that we provide them with IDEA software, at virtually no cost. And it's amazing, what these students are learning in college,
Yeah. And how do they see the light? I think for the most part there usually is some sort of a large fraud or error or mistake or something that leads everyone to realize, hey, we need to do something about this. And it could even be just losing work papers, mind you, where the last work paper getting lost, someone decides enough's enough, where we got to automate this because I'm going to lose my job if we lose another work paper binder. I don't know how much the standards, I put the standards require it, and I keep mentioning that. I mean, I think as we've been talking, it's starting to kind of get in there more and more. There are some risk alerts that point to it, so you can get there. But I personally, I'm more about saving companies money and showing the ROI from that perspective. And then the standard is more of an afterthought. Like that standard was written because it was a good idea in the first place. Anyway, so
and I talk more about effective and efficiency of operation. Have I found the big findings? Certainly. Have they cost justified themselves? hundreds of times over.
Yeah,
But,
right.
you know, to me, I started with analytics because it took 8 weeks, 5 auditors, 8 weeks to do one service office. And I said, I don't want my life on hold for 8 weeks, you know, out and back, out and back. And I jumped into analytics, and within the next year when we beta tested our first continuous audit from an audit-built database, it took 2 auditors 2.5 weeks to do the same job. And that more than cost justified on air travel, hotel travel, meals, you know. It just was massive.
Right, and agreed. And when you can, you know, risk assess across the whole company before even picking that, you know, location audit, yeah, agree. I mean, you're getting
Totally.
to just totally different. Yep.
Effectiveness and efficiency.
Yep.
And when we left the audit, I always had in the closing conference, my favorite question at the end of the audit is, what did we fail to find that you knew we would? And many people go, no, not until you issue that report, we're not going to answer that. But some of them would, and they would say, you know what, I've never had an audit like this. Your use of analytics, pouring through the data, we knew everything was fair game because you had the entire data sets.
Right.
I said, yep, that's the game. So anyway, I'll
That's
stop
fine.
on that one.
That's fine. So, yeah, getting on to the final best practices here, you know, and a lot of which I'm sure we've talked about. But, you know, I see, I put this first one down and I have always kept it there because it's just a good risk, you know, good best practice in any software development is get your process down first. And what I'm finding is a lot of departments are even rethinking their whole work paper package system, and in some cases it's burdening them too much, and they're like following it just to follow it, but no one's really getting any value out of it. So, I mean, sitting down, really thinking through the process, thinking through where you need to have reviews, where, you know, data should be backed up and how you could do that, and just trying to think through, again, do you want to be on the web all the time, etc. I like to find some money out of the box, and, you know, as I keep saying, and even if it's a prototype or just a small system just to show, you know, value, obviously, you know, training, identifying technology champions and then training them and kind of keeping them, and, you know, probably paying them more, you know, is probably a good idea as well, if you value it. Integrating the data, as we talked about, putting all of that data together as part of a GRC, but I keep coming back to it. It's so simple, but, you know, I wish I could do it in my workouts every day, or, you know, kind of thing, but it's just making it routine. I mean, if people routinely used Excel in every audit to do pivot tabling of, you know, the client data, and everyone did that, you would just have a much different audit year, I think, than when they're not. And I think even if it's simple things like that that you could just make routine, it is definitely, you know, one of the best practices. So it kind of gets down to just like planning it in the first place. I know I'm being cognizant of the time as well. I don't want to go over too much here today at all, but as we looked at kind of the, you know, the process, I had a couple of slides in here where we, you know, I took a look at the various types of processes, you know, of financial audit, fraud examination, you know, all that, and they all kind of follow the same process. You know, I mean, you almost could get an audit work paper package, and it could be your fraud work paper case management system. It could be your audit work paper management system. It could probably be your Sarbanes-Oxley control system, and you know, there are products out there that do all of those, but it does follow pretty much this process here. You know, and I think in any audits, I wrote this 5 years ago, but it hasn't really changed very much. So with that said, I mean, you need to think about how your process is a bit different, but the general kind of process stays the same. So it shouldn't be that hard of a, you know, step to go through your process and think of how to automating it. Sorry. And I'm just going to skip over the progress question. We'll get to it at the end here. And you know, I remember giving one quick example of not getting the process down, and you know, for the most part, went out, just quickly bought an enterprise risk management system, after they bought it, then realized that the way that they wanted to do their Sarbanes-Oxley process was totally different on how the software worked, and then they decided to go back to spreadsheets. So it gives you a good example of like how things could go wrong if you know you're not following things carefully. And again, this was just a quick slide I wanted to note on, you know, the old way of kind of managing it was you bought the software, you train the staff, you trial and error, and then you might find something. And I'm kind of big on saying, you know, maybe work out some sort of engagement where you can get some of those profit leaks up front, and then once you've made the business case, then, you know, train and buy and everything else. And, you know, and I think a lot of this even goes to just getting like one audit automated, where you know, you go to a teammate or whoever and say, you know, we'd like to prototype this with a couple of people, and, you know, depending on how that goes, we'll do everything else. And I just think that that's a best practice of kind of getting cash out first before moving any further. From a data side, I don't want to, you know, I want to be cognizant of time here. I think we just have a couple more slides. You know, for the most part, I'm finding that automating that data import part, and, you know, someone had mentioned about web data and how to get that data, and I agree. I mean, I think the data import and normalization part is one of the hardest parts, and if you can automate that with IT and other tools that you're using, that will save you a lot of time on your data analytics, and that is the one place to get better at. And if you can, because once you have a data file in an IDEA or ACL, you can do 100 different things with it. I think also reducing false positives, using some techniques, you know, out there like scoring, mathematical scoring or graphing, and really trying to reduce false positives is another key data analytic best practice that I'm seeing. You know, and as I said, document save, videotape it. You know, what happens is champions leave, and it's great to go back to a fully documented video montage of how to run the system. So, you know, keeping as much of this in kind of a central location is probably kind of the ringing best practice on all of this stuff. And just a couple of last thoughts here that I had from a driver's point of view, and then we'll do a progress question and get everybody's kind of thoughts here. But I think just planning it in, I mean, it sounds so simple, but just sitting down and saying, you know, this year we're going to do 5 audits with analytics, and we're going to set up a little data warehouse, and, you know, and it doesn't have to be a huge expense, but it can build a lot of value for the company. Yeah, very good.
That's what I refer as the roadmap. Build that roadmap and stick to it.
Stick to it, right? Yep. And I think so. Anyway, that was it. I was kind of looking here to, you know, how automation can drive things quicker. But let me go to this final polling question and kind of open it up for questions, final thoughts, what to remember first. I hope we went over this. So this was our what is not a reason for audit software implementations being inhibited: numerous analytic champions on the team, lack of management support, cost of software, or lack of training. And I have been seeing the questions come in. I know we're a couple minutes before the end here, and I know we had some closing thoughts, but I didn't know if anyone had any other thoughts or final questions from our group. And I'm kind of looking at the questions as we're talking here. I think we got a lot you know, of it covered so far. Is PII private or personally identifiable information? Is it
it's
private
kind
or
of private and personal is kind of the same.
Okay.
But it's typically personal.
Right. It's a way of attaching it to a person.
Identification, yeah.
Okay. Yep. Big data. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll change 2 to 2. Okay. I think I've gotten all the questions so far.
I hope the guy that wants the 5 1/4 inch floppy can find it.
I hope he can find a computer to put it into.
Yeah, I bet there's a USB one these days. Right?
Tiger Direct. There's a USB one at Tiger Direct.
Yeah, I figured.
$20.
Well, anyway, I think we've answered all that. Let me close
Yeah.
out this poll and get to the final thoughts here. Yeah, numerous analytic champions on the team. That would be helpful. I mean, it won't inhibit things, so that's good. So, just some final notes. I know there were a couple of questions in there about training. What we try to do is get all of these videos out on auditsoftwarevideos.com, and we will have a recording out there. We obviously have lots of different types of training in ACL, Excel, IDEA, Active Data for Excel. Gosh, there are a few other products out there, but for the most part, I will say it's ACL, IDEA, and Excel. They're the three main products. But they're all kind of set up in more of that just-in-time training format that we talked about is very useful. And again, this video series will be out there as well, so you should be able to get back to it if you had to. We will be sending out all the files we talked about. I know there's a couple that are links that you can get to from the slides, but some others I will put in. The buyer's guide will definitely be in there for everybody. And let me just note, Jim has another survey on fraud detection using technology, and you can mobile phone take a picture of the slide, I guess. But until I do all of that, I apologize. I need to hide my poll. Sorry about that, folks.
That's okay. I hit it for you.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, we created a QR code so you can scan that with your mobile phone. Try to make it as easy as possible. We're looking for your input on our 2013 fraud techniques using technology. We've gotten over 100 responses to the survey so far, and we're finding some interesting results. One of those being that the amount of frauds that are being discovered by tips was reported at 23%, which is not the same results that the ACFE has been getting in their annual survey. They seem to think it's much higher, but yeah, I think that they don't really ask the question about the use of technology and how much fraud is being detected by technology. But we also found some results that were interesting in terms of most of the frauds were discovered within 1 year, and the bulk of the rest of them were under 5 years. Nothing was over 5 years, which is a good sign, because it used to be that these frauds went on. How long did the equity funding scandal go on?
It was 6 years.
6 years, yeah.
6 years.
So I think that we're finding fraud sooner. It doesn't mean that there's any less amount of fraud, but we are finding it sooner, and so we're getting some interesting results from the survey. And the majority of the people are using data analysis technology more in the investigative side, investigating fraud, than they are on the detecting side. But the detecting side is still significantly higher than we experienced the last time we ran this survey. So look for the results of that, and if you haven't taken the survey, please scan the code or go to the Auditnet site, and you'll find a link to that.
Great. Well, yeah, I mean, thanks again, everyone. Sorry we're a couple minutes late. I think we've gotten to all of your questions, and we do thank you. This is a slide of our contact info and how to get in touch with everyone here. I'm sure everyone would be open to questions if people have them, so feel free. But we do appreciate everyone coming today. Thanks again, Don, for jumping on short notice like that. But it's always great to get your feedback, and I know you've been doing this longer than all of us.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what that means, that he's been doing it longer than all of us, but I think
all of us combined.
Probably, actually.
I think this was great, and I want to thank both Rich and Don for sharing their knowledge and their expertise in this. And we are pushing forward with the concept of bringing technology to audit departments, and I think that we're all pretty much on the same page as far as there's a definite need for this. So the webinars, we'll be doing more webinars like this where they'll either be low cost or they'll be no cost with CPE, providing tools that can help along with this. Rich and I are in the process of building a script library that we'll have scripts for ACL, IDEA, Excel macros, and all of that. So we are building all of that, and we really appreciate your joining us today. So we jointly want to wish you a great day and a great weekend, and thanks for your support and your attendance. Have a great day.